Part 21, Chapter 11. There was less confidence in the faces of those assembled in the mess room than last time. No one tried to hide it, least of all Parker and Ripley. Having seen what they were now confronted by, they retained very little in the way of confidence at all. Dallas was examining a recently printed schematic of the Nostromo. Parker stood by the door, occasionally glancing nervously down the corridor. "Whatever it was," the engineer said into the silence, "it was big. Swung down on him like a giant fucking bat." Dallas looked up from the layout. "You're absolutely sure it dragged Brett into a vent?" "It disappeared into one of the cooling ducts." Ripley was scratching the back of one hand with the other. "I'm sure I saw it go in. Anyway, there was nowhere else for it to go." "No question about it," Parker added. "It's using the air shafts to move around. That's why we never ran it down with the tracker." The air shafts. Dallas looked convinced. "Makes sense. Jones does the same thing." Lambert played with her coffee, stirring the dark liquid with an idle finger. "Brett could still be alive." "Not a chance." Ripley wasn't being fatalistic, only logical. "It snapped him up like a rag doll." "What does it want him for anyway?" Lambert wanted to know. "Why take him instead of killing him on the spot?" "Perhaps it requires an incubator, the way the first form used Kane," Ash suggested. "Or food," said Ripley tightly. She shivered. Lambert put down her coffee. "Either way, it's 2 down and 5 to go from the alien standpoint." Parker had been turning his shock tube over and over in his hands. Now he turned and threw it hard against a wall. It bent, fell to the deck, and crackled a couple of times before lying still. "I say, we blast the rotten bastard with a laser and take our chances." Dallas tried to sound sympathetic. "I know how you feel, Parker. We all liked Brett. But we've got to keep our heads. If the creature's now as big as you say, it's holding enough acid to burn a hole in the ship as big as this room. Not to mention what it would do to the circuitry and controls running through the decks. No way we can chance that. Not yet." "Not yet?" Parker's sense of helplessness cancelled out much of his fury. "How many have to die besides Brett before you can see that's the way to handle this thing?" "It wouldn't work anyway, Parker." The engineer turned to face Ash, frowned at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean you'd have to hit a vital organ with a laser on your first shot. From your description of the creature, it's now extremely fast, as well as large and powerful. I think it's reasonable to assume it retains the same capacity for rapid regeneration as its first hand form. That means you'd have to kill it instantly, or it would be all over you. Not only would that be difficult to do if your opponent were a mere man, it's also virtually impossible to do with this alien, because we have no idea where its vital point is. We don't even know that it has a vital point. Don't you see?" He was trying to be understanding, like Dallas had been. Everyone knew how close the two engineers had been. "Can't you envision what would happen? Let's say a couple of us succeeded in confronting the creature in an open area where we can get a clear shot at it, which is by no means a certainty. We laser it, half a dozen times before it tears us all to pieces. All 6 wounds heal fast enough to preserve the alien's life, but not before it's bled enough acid to eat numerous holes in the ship. Maybe some of the stuff burns through the circuitry monitoring our air supply, or cuts the power to the ship's lights. I don't consider that an unreasonable scenario, given what we know about the creature. And what's the result? We've lost 2 or more people, and shipwise, we're worse off than we were before we confronted it. Parker didn't reply, looked sullen. Finally, he mumbled, "Then what the hell are we going to do?" The only plan that stands a chance of working is the one we had before, Dallas told him. He tapped the schematic. "We find which shaft it's in, then drive it from there into an airlock and blast it into space." "Drive it?" Parker laughed hollowly. "I'm telling you that son of a bitch is huge." He spat contemptuously at his bent shock tube. "We aren't driving that thing anywhere with those." "For once he has a point," said Lambert. "We have to get it to a lock. How do we drive it?" Ripley's gaze travelled around the little cluster of humanity. "I think it's time the science department brought us up to date with our visitor. Haven't you got any ideas, Ash?" The science officer considered. "Well, it seems to have adapted well to an oxygen-rich atmosphere. That may have something to do with its spectacularly rapid growth in this stage." "This stage?" Lambert echoed questioningly. "You mean it might turn into something else again?" Ash spread his hands. "We know so little about it. We should be prepared for anything. It has already metamorphosed 3 times. Egg to hand shape, hand to the thing that came out of Cain, and that into this much larger bipedal form. We have no reason to assume that this form is the final stage in the chain of development." He paused, added, "The next form it assumes could conceivably be even larger and more powerful." "That's encouraging," murmured Ripley. "What else?" "In addition to its new atmosphere, it certainly adapted well for its nutritional requirements. So we know it can exist on very little, in various atmospheres, and possibly in none at all, for an unspecified period of time. About the only thing we don't know is its ability to handle drastic changes in temperature. It's comfortably warm aboard the Nostromo. Considering the mean temperature on the world where we discovered it, I think we can reasonably rule out bitter cold as a potential deterrent, though the early egg form may have been tougher in that respect than the present one. There is precedent for that." "All right," asked Ripley. "What about the temperature? What happens if we raise it?" "Let's give it a try," said Ash. "We can't raise the temperature of the entire ship for the same reason we couldn't exhaust all the air. Not enough airtime in our suits, limited mobility, helplessness while confined in the freezers, and so on. But most creatures retreat from fire. It's not necessary to heat the whole ship." "We could string a high-voltage wire across a few corridors and lure it into one. That would fry it good," Lambert suggested. "This isn't an animal we're dealing with. Or if it is," Ash told her, "it's a supremely skillful one. It's not going to charge blindly into a cord or anything else blocking an obvious transitway like a corridor. It's already demonstrated that by choosing the air shafts to travel about in instead of the corridors. Besides, certain primitive organisms like the shark are sensitive to electric fields. On balance, not a good idea." Maybe it can detect the electrical fields our own bodies generate, said Ripley gloomily. Maybe that's how it tracks. Parker looked doubtful. I wouldn't bet that it didn't depend on its eyes, if that's what those things are. They aren't, said Ripley. A creature so obviously resourceful probably utilizes many senses in tracking, Ash added. I don't like the cord idea anyway. Parker's face was flushed. I don't like tricking around. When it goes out the lock, I want to be there. I want to see it die. He went quiet for a bit, added less emotionally. I want to hear it scream like Brett. How long to hook up 3 or 4 incinerating units? Dallas wanted to know. Give me 20 minutes. The basic units are already there, in storage. It's just a question of modifying them for handheld use. Can you make them powerful enough? We don't want to run into the kind of situation that Ash described if we were using lasers. We want something that'll stop it in its tracks. Don't worry. Parker's voice was cold. I'll fix them so they'll cook anything they touch on contact. Seems like our best chance then. The captain glanced around the table. Anyone got any better ideas? No one did. Okay. Dallas pushed away from the table, rose. When Parker's ready with his flamethrowers, we'll start from here and work our way back down to sea level and the bay, where it took Brett. Then we'll try to trace it from there. Parker sounded dubious. It went up with him through the hull bracing before it entered the air shaft. Be hell trying to follow it up there. I'm no ape. He stared warningly at Ripley, but she didn't comment. You rather sit here and wait until it's ready to come looking for you? Dallas asked. The longer we can keep it on the defensive, the better it'll be for us. Except for one thing, Ripley said. What's that? We're not sure it's ever been on the defensive. She met his gaze squarely. The flamethrowers were bulkier than the shock tubes and looked less effective, but the tubes had functioned as they were supposed to, and Parker had assured them all that the incinerators would too. He declined to give them a demonstration this time because, he explained, the flamers were powerful enough to sear the decking. The fact that he was trusting his own life to the devices was proof enough anyway, for everyone except Ripley. She was beginning to become suspicious of everyone and everything. She'd always been a little paranoid. Current events were making it worse. She began to worry as much over what was happening to her mind as she was about the alien. Of course, as soon as they found and killed the alien, the mental problems would vanish. Wouldn't they? The tight knot of edgy humanity worked its cautious way down from the mess to B level. They were heading for the next companionway when both tracking devices commenced a frantic beeping. Ash and Ripley quickly shut off the beepers. They had to follow the shifting needles only a dozen meters before a louder, different sound became audible. Metal tearing. Easy. Dallas cradled his flamethrower, turned the corner of the corridor. Loud, rending noises continued, more clearly now. He knew where they were originating. The food locker. He whispered back to them. It's inside. Listen to that, Lambert murmured in awe. Jesus, it must be big. Big enough, agreed Parker softly. I saw it, remember? And strong. It carried Brett like... He cut off in mid-sentence, thoughts of Brett choking off any desire for conversation. Dallas raised the nozzle of his flamethrower. There's a duct opening into the back of the locker. That's how it got here. He glanced over at Parker. You sure these things are working? I made them, didn't I? That's what worries us, said Ripley. They moved forward. The tearing sounds continued. When they were positioned just outside the locker, Dallas glanced away from Parker to the door handle. The engineer reluctantly got a grip on the heavy protrusion. Dallas stood back a couple of steps, readied the flamethrower. Now! Parker wrenched the door open, jumped back out of the way. Dallas thumbed the firing stud on the clumsy weapon. A startlingly wide fan of orange fire filled the entrance to the food locker, causing everyone to draw away from the intense heat. Dallas moved forward quickly, ignoring the lingering heat that burned his throat, and fired another blast inside. Then a third. He was over the raised base now and had to twist himself so he could fire sideways. Several minutes were spent nervously waiting outside for the locker's interior to cool enough for them to enter. Despite the weight, the heat radiating from the smouldering garbage inside was so intense they had to walk carefully, lest they bump into any of the oven-hot crates or the locker walls. The locker itself was a total loss. What the alien had begun, Dallas's flamethrower had finished. Deep black streaks showed on the walls, testimony to the concentrated power of the incinerator. The stench of charred artificial food components, mixed with carbonized packaging, was overpowering in the confined space. Despite the havoc wrought by the flamethrower, not everything within the locker had been destroyed. Ample evidence of the alien's handiwork lay scattered about, untouched by the flames. Packages of every size were strewn about the floor, opened in ways and by means their manufacturers had never envisioned. Solid metal storage tins, so called because of the tradition and not their metallurgical makeup, had been peeled apart like fruit. From what they could see, the alien hadn't left much intact for the flamethrower to finish off. Keeping trackers and incinerators handy, they poked through the debris. Pungent smoke drifted upward and burned their eyes. Careful inspection of every sizable pile of ruined supplies failed to produce the hoped-for discovery. Since all the food stocked aboard the Nostromo was artificial and homogeneous in composition, the only bones they would find would belong to the alien. But the closest thing they found to bones were the reinforcing bands from several large crates. Ripley and Lambert started to relax against a still hot wall, remembered not to. We didn't get it, the warrant officer muttered disappointedly. Then where the hell is it? Lambert asked her. Over here. They all turned to see Dallas standing near the back wall, behind a pile of melted black plastic. His flamethrower was pointing at the wall. This is where it went. Moving over, Ripley and the others saw that Dallas's frame was blocking the expected ventilator opening. The protective grill that normally covered the gap was lying on the floor below it, in pieces. Dallas removed the light bar from his belt, directed the beam into the shaft. It revealed only smooth metal twisting off into the distance. When he spoke, he sounded excited. About time we got a break. What are you talking about? Lambert asked. He looked back at them. Don't you see? This could end up working for us. The duct comes out at the main airlock. There's only one other opening large enough along the way for the creature to escape through, and we can cover that. Then we drive it into the lock with the flamethrowers and blast it into space." "Yeah." Lambert's tone indicated that she didn't share the captain's enthusiasm for the project. "Nothing to it. All you have to do is crawl into the vent after it, find your way through the maze until you're staring it in the face, and then pray it's afraid of fire." Dallas's smile waned. The addition of the human element sort of kills the simplicity of it, doesn't it? But it should work, given that it's fearful of fire. It's our best chance. This way, we don't have to back it into a corner and hope the flames will kill it in time. It can keep on retreating right towards the waiting lock. "That's all fine and good," agreed Lambert. "The problem is, who goes in after it?"